So now it's my privilege to introduce a dear friend of mine, but a great colleague, Kimberley Swords. Now, Kimberley is, as you can see, an expert in lots of different things. She was the Deputy Secretary for the Federal Government in 2010 to 2015, when Australia was preparing and signing the Accord in Paris. I copied Kimberley's LinkedIn profile, and I could go on for probably half an hour about her qualifications. Kimberley initially qualified as a vet, and she obviously wasn't going to be limited by that, and her interest in strategic planning, the environment and sustainability is now her focus. So, Kimberley, without further ado, can I hand over to you?
Indeed, and no pressure to see one of the Fellows of the Environment Institute of Australia in the room as I arrive. I would also like to pay my respects to the elders of the past and present, and to other elders here with us today, the Turrbal and Yagara people. I have not prepared a long, detailed speech. In fact, I haven't prepared any speech at all, because usually these things work a lot better when we get to go where you're interested, rather than me going, here's half an hour of me telling you really boring stuff that you actually didn't want to know, or even worse, telling you how fabulous I am, which is kind of not really a thing or very much fun. But anyway, so as Craig said, I've known Craig and Jenny since you guys met, like 40 years ago. They were at university. My father was involved in the Scouts, and my father and the family are very much part of my origin story in terms of how I got involved in the environment. They were active volunteers in the church, in the Scouts, they were teachers, they were scientists, and so as a young person in Brisbane, went to school, did a vet degree. No one in the family had really heard of anything much other than that, although we knew these two people who were lawyers, and they sort of turned out all right. So I did veterinary science because another mate of ours did veterinary science, and I practiced for 5 or 6 years in the country, and it was great. Worked on farms, chased cows, all those sort of cool things, and use this story as find the things you're curious about, and then I'll answer anything you want me to answer about anything that I might have an opinion or any knowledge of, or even not so much knowledge of. And then I got married to a bloke who didn't want to live in the country, so that didn't go very well with the country practice part. So we moved to Melbourne, and I joined the Victorian government. And at that time in Victoria, they just removed a whole heap of people. All the enviros between the ages of 30 and 40 had left. In fact, all the Aggies had left as well, the sustainable Aggies. And so there was this huge opportunity to do cool things like the National Action Plan for Sustainability and Water Quality. I was involved in setting that up in Victoria. The establishment of catchment management governance and the frameworks for that, funding agreements, and then a round of development in Melbourne, which was around the 2030 growth vision and plan for the City of Melbourne. So that was bringing the biodiversity in to sit on the table with the roads and the water and the transport and the planning requirements. From there, I guess the sort of theory of my career has been doing things that people think you can't do at a pretty big scale. So with Melbourne, nobody knew that you could take a dot point that was called Creative Grassland Reserve and turn it into a $100 million funding stream for purchase of private land west of Melbourne for grasslands conservation. But there is now a big grasslands reserve west of Melbourne because of the way we played nicely with other parts of government and didn't ask for permission to do things too much. We just did them and sort of put this biodiversity into a place where it kind of had to be mainstream. So after that, went and worked with the Commonwealth Government, again in environment. So environmental regulation, you might have heard of the EPBC Act. It's currently got amendments in Parliament. Again, yeah. So back in my time, in 2010, was the Hawke review of the EPBC Act, and an effort to amend the Act that was unsuccessful. In fact, the Minister at the time didn't even bother to introduce the amendments into the Parliament. So I know a few things about the EPBC Act and how it works. I know quite a lot around biodiversity offsets because we established the Commonwealth Biodiversity Offset Policy, Framework and Markets, which has turned into...
What's a biodiversity offset?
Hey, oh, okay. So it's basically if you want to build something and knock all the trees down, usually there are conditions that go with that permission, and some of those conditions are called biodiversity offsets.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of compensation.
Righto.
Only it's compensation that's got its origin in the science of ecology. So it's got to be the same kind of habitat,
Yeah.
same kind of species. You've got to make it better.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's all right.
No, I don't know enough about where you guys are coming from. So during the period with the Commonwealth, the Paris Agreement was up for negotiation, and Minister Hunt was the minister, and he needed to take a policy position to Paris that was defensible and evidence-based, and so that was when the safeguards mechanism was designed. So that's the mechanism where large emitters need to reduce the amount of emissions that they're having year on year under the climate change conventions. And so for the last 10 years or so, I guess I've been working in a whole range of different advisory roles, working on structuring energy transition companies, organisational design and leadership, running leadership programs for environment people through the EIANZ, and more recently on the board of CS Energy, which you might know is one of Queensland's government-owned corporations. We have a couple of big batteries, some in construction wind farms, lots of power purchase agreements for solar, and 5 legacy coal-fired power stations. So if anyone's got any questions about that kind of stuff, I would be very happy to take them. Yeah. So I'm kind of like in your hands in terms of what do you want to know? What do you want to talk about? Do we want to talk about the Liberal Party and the backward on No, we don't want to talk about that. Yeah, go for it.
But that'd be funny, wouldn't it? You get everyone laughing. But anyway, a serious consideration of the biodiversity loss that's going to occur due to all these wind farms along ridge tops.
It's a great question, and I mean the thing that's fascinating about the energy transition, wind farm, renewables debate, and it is a debate at the moment in Australia, is it's kind of like everyone forgot that we already have planning law. And so we have planning law, and the planning law has put in place, codified and established what the arrangements are for protecting a range of different community values, including biodiversity. Now, if we want to change that law because we think the damage is too much, then we should. But in the meantime, the argumentation around impact and the reality of impact don't always match terribly well, and it's like, you know, looking at forestry back in the day. Forestry looks awful. You know, a freshly bulldozed track up to a wind farm pad looks awful. And until you are able to step back and look at it, you know, in toto once they're built, it is impossible actually to tell what the impact has been. So one of the challenges we've got is that we've got existing law within existing environmental protections that is being complied with by the people who are building the wind farms, and they're building a lot of them, like they were building a lot of coal seam gas 12 years ago, 15 years ago. So there is a law, it is being implemented. If that law is insufficient, then citizens have the right to get the law changed.
Do you have an opinion if the law is sufficient?
The scientific evidence shows that the biodiversity offset arrangements that Australia has are not being implemented satisfactorily. Okay. So the design is good. The practical application, particularly in New South Wales, is insufficient, and Queensland has always been insufficient ecologically. I think there's at least one person in this room who knows a lot more about this topic than I do. And you might end up getting fingered for this. But my personal opinion is I think that there is rigour in the implementation of environmental law that is absent at the moment in the way that some of it's being delivered. Okay. I think there's a lot of potential, But the development law that we have at the moment results in a steady decline. It's been established by quite a lot of people. Yeah.
Slightly.
I can't get to go on video and be very controversial.
Just a question around, we've heard from Sol Griffiths a bit. We've partnered with Rewiring Australia. And one of the things that he does quite well is he tries to overlay the economics as well as the environmental aspects to it. And so one of the challenges we have is there's a lot of misinformation or conflicting information around the cost of renewables and what's happening. He paints a very, one argument, which is if we strip back some of the subsidies for the fossil fuels, that renewables will actually generate a much larger return for the community and the environment, financially as well as environmentally.
Absolutely.
Do you have anything to say in terms of, are there other sources that we can look to and point to fact checks when they say, when the argument is put forward that renewables is going to cost the community and such?
Yeah, it's a great
more?
question. The one that I'm struggling with at the moment in the political conversation is that we have got coal-fired generation that we can extend the life of in an economically rational manner. And as a board member of CS Energy, I know what the actual costs of that are. So, we've just had a 3-month shutdown at Callide C3 for an overhaul, and it's cost the joint venture $80 million. Added on to that, during the middle of the day, when demand is low and production is high of renewables, the price of energy in the NEM in almost every state is negative, which means that if I can only ramp those coal-fired power stations down to about 2/3, which is what we can do, we lose only 2/3 of the money we would have lost if they were running at full tilt. So the rhetoric around the simplicity and low cost of extending the life of existing assets doesn't really stand up to a fact check.
Thanks.
Can I get someone to run the queue of questions?
Sure, if you like.
Yeah, because
there we go.
otherwise,
Yep.
I was just going to ask, wouldn't there be a balance? We talk, there's wind, there's solar, there's hydro, and there's gas. Wouldn't there be a sort of percentage that you're going to have of wind farms where we think we might have too many of them or to do too much destruction, where the other things seem to be less harmful to the environment and that? Would there be a percentage to say that for the next 15, 20 years or something, some sort of project where you say, well, we'll only most probably need so many wind turbos to drive the place, but we'll need more turbos to stay producing more, and we need batteries to be doing more and storing. Is there some sort of plan like that, balancing it out, that there's a strategy with it all?
No.
Than just an overall thing that the ordinary fellow said, well, it's a lot of, we don't understand it. And that's the trouble at the moment. People don't understand what's really going on. Because at the moment I read where, if it's true or not, we're producing more battery power or generated power from our solar and that than what we are with coal-fired power station. The thing the other day, I think it was about 82% of generated by renewables. And it was less by coal. And nobody seems to understand all this,
Yeah. And
especially with mugs like me.
It's fascinating because when I joined the board of CS, the chairman at the time, a great bloke called Adam Aspinall, says to me, it's really complicated, the energy system. And it's like, yeah, it's really complicated, I can assure you of that. So the short answer to your question is, yes, it's perfectly possible to go, in theory, there should be this much wind and this much solar and this much gas and this much storage. But a number of the parameters change really quite abruptly. And so one thing that changes a lot is what we call peak load, which is how much electricity we use. And so if you compare sort of a slightly cold, miserable spring day in Queensland where everyone's put their jumper on but not their heater, with the peak of summer when it's 8 o'clock at night and everyone's gone home and turned on their air conditioner, the demand gap is kind of like from here to here. And the power system has to be built out so that when the demand is here, the lights still work and go on, because we're all intolerant of blackouts and brownouts and things like that. So that's one problem. The other problem is on the generation side, the variation in the amount of wind and the amount of solar that's coming in at any particular moment changes over the course of a single day, a lot. And if I could paint a picture for you, we have a control room in CS which is pretty standard for the generation companies from which we dispatch our trading, and it's got the weather and it's got long run weather for sort of the next 3 years. It's then got about 150 different generators in Australia who are selling electricity into the market of all different kinds, so gas and hydro and wind and solar and coal-fired power and all of the rest of it. And then it's got the demand coming from each different place. And you sell electricity every 5 minutes into the national electricity market through a combination of basically a rental agreement based on a particular cost, so futures of various kinds, and then what they call the spot price, which is a really complicated.
So, but I understand that gas, instead of coal, you can fire that up instantly.
That's right.
And that's where we're having trouble now. It appears we can't get enough gas at the moment, or could run out. Depends which side of.
Well, we haven't actually got enough gas-powered generators to meet the demand of the coal-fired generators that we've got at the moment.
And how long do they take to build?
About 8 years.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're just starting to build one out at Brigalow. So we've had the commercial negotiations with GE around the turbines for the last 3 years, and those turbines have now been manufactured and they're on their way here. So the site's cleared and it'll, I think the APA agreement's just been signed, but the economics of gas-fired power station meant that the only people who were willing to invest in it were the Queensland Government, because the commercial returns don't give what the Macquaries and all of those guys want to be able to earn. And that's been one of the problems with Australia's transition so far, is the investments in the renewables at scale haven't come through yet. So when you loop back to the beginning of that set of conversation of, yes, in theory we know the answer, we did some work for the Commonwealth when I worked for McKinsey, and basically we needed to build wind at 2.5 times the speed that we currently are, solar at 1.2 times the speed that we currently were, and then there were numbers for gas and such things, up until 2032 to have a snowflake's chance of making the.
So they have done it.
Yeah.
But the only thing now is the power lines, isn't it? And all the things that hook it into the system.
Yeah, so we need the power lines, we need the interconnectors, but the other thing we need to remember, and it's particularly hard for rural and regional communities, is we actually need twice as much electricity as we already generate. So because we're putting all the cars and the data centres and the stovetops and the air conditioning and everything onto electricity instead of diesel or whatever it used to be before, the electricity demand also goes up a lot. Yeah.
So Monica had a question, I think. Yeah.
I have lots of questions, but one of the things that we were sort of talking about with our community battery was, wouldn't it be much more logical to generate electricity where it's needed? So, for example, in a suburb like the Gap, we want to be an example.
Yep.
Couldn't we put solar on each house that doesn't yet have it, and have batteries so that we always are independent from the grid, and then we don't need long transmission lines and so on? Actually, that was one of the ideas when we first got this initiative together. We thought then the community could be independent, similar to what I guess Rewiring Australia is trialling in New South Wales. And any profit could be put back into the community for teachers, for swimming pools, for whatever the community wants.
So completely technically feasible.
And so why are we not doing it? Is it the...
So the why are we not doing it is we have an existing transmission grid that's been built around the single source, base load, very large power stations that we have. So our transmission to those places is already built, and someone has to pay for that transmission to continue to be available to all the other people who need it. So at the moment, the way the energy system works is the Commonwealth regulators regulate prices that are paid by the Origins and AGLs and everyone else for transmission access, and that is investing in all of those poles and wires. So the decision to go completely off-grid requires disconnection from a grid, which at the moment the national electricity rules don't allow.
So Kimberly, I guess the question I had was, we're aware of how complex all this is. Our electrical subcommittee has gone into this, and we've had discussions with ministers and everything else. What seems to be lacking, in my view, is that there is no clear policy that will allow industry and individuals and our society to actually go down a path that's going to create an efficient. If we're in a benevolent dictatorship, I'm sure we could do it. But at the moment, it just seems, and there's been government after government after government who've failed to really address the issue. Is that
Fair.
a fair comment?
Is that a fair comment? I think there's some considerations around that comment. So the thing that really has snuck up on everyone is the amount of behind the meter solar that's gone in, and the impact that that's had on the grid and the network and the prices and the way the national electricity market works. And so if you could work out a way for the entire gap to be behind the meter of something, it would be possible to do what you've described. So if you were BHP Billiton and you ran the gap, you could do that. I imagine that there's a fair number of property rights and agreements that need to be put in place between the citizens and each other, and whoever is the asset operator to make it happen in real life. But in theory, you could do it.
That's right. So you could have an organisation
Yep.
that has an agreement with all of the house owners,
Yep.
puts the solar there, has the battery and sells the power back to them,
Well,
or gives the power to them, and away you go.
So Craig,
yeah, you actually could, and in fact, I think it's Origin has introduced a product in New South Wales that I heard about for the first time last week, which is an $800 monthly fee, which sounds like an awful lot, but for your $800 monthly fee, you get all of your electricity, an electric vehicle and a battery, and solar panels on your roof.
a similar scheme in Malaysia. So our organization is based out of Malaysia. So the government there has got a program where it will clip the ticket for an operator to go in and put solar panels on homes that don't have it, who are unlikely to use that amount of energy. And so effectively, based on where the substation is, you can carve up the neighborhoods and say, okay, we're going to go around and we're going to basically rent to use your rooftop.
Yep.
We'll give you power, and we'll sell that excess power to this corporate over here that wants to renew their energy supply, and then the distributor clips it based on the kilowatt hour that they want it for the transmission costs. So
Yeah.
someone's got to pay for the transmission costs.
And,
so they
and the
clip down
trade-off with that is you usually end up with what they call curtailment in
Yeah.
your house as a possibility.
Yeah.
And so this is where everyone's getting a bit exercised about smart meters at the moment, where some of them turn your air conditioning off if you're using electricity at a really high demand period of time. But it's kind of swings and roundabouts. If you think
Yeah.
that the grid should operate that way, then you have to also accept that sometimes you'll have to get turned off. And in exchange for you being turned off, the hospital got to stay on. Yeah.
And then there's the whole question of what sort of temperature you run your aircon at.
Yep,
I
absolutely.
mean, it's been suggested that you should run it below 27.
Well, that'd be
Because-
fantastic, wouldn't it?
So,
We'd all save an
yeah,
awful
20
lot of energy if we
Yes.
did that. Yeah.
27
So
is a
it's a
very
question,
pleasant temperature.
Yeah. There's like this lady in the yellow shirt as
Fill
well.
the room there.
Oh, sorry. Pamela, did I miss you?
No.
Barbara, well, I've got a question. I know a little bit is done about demand management and we're just touching on it, but how much more do you think will be done? I mean, there's no demand management on me. If I want to run the aircon at dinner time, that doesn't, I pay the same. And, I get basically nothing for the solar, so, it can be in my interest to manage my load, but, I mean, as far as the cost goes, there isn't anything on me. I think there is, there's more demand management on maybe some big corporations and that. Can you tell
Yeah,
us
so
a bit about that?
the policy that Australia's adopted is to use the price signals of the national electricity market to change your behaviour rather than a community education program or incentive payments. And so...
But I pay the same day and night.
Do you?
Yeah.
that's very unusual. Very unusual.
I mean, except for the hot water system. But
it's pretty unusual to have a single tariff,
Flat rate,
or a
yeah.
flat rate tariff. Yeah, very, very unusual. Almost everyone now has variable pricing, peak and off-peak at the very least.
I don't.
I think they have.
I'm with Orange.
I've got a flat rate.
Maybe they do.
All have flat rates. You all have flat rates. There you go. Right, moving
like
to
the
the
world.
gate. Join the Republic of Flat Rates power.
There is a control though, mate. I'm going to put a flat rate. Everything else.
I think Origin offered that. Came around, said everybody will, saying, based on our analysis, you'd be better off on a flat rate.
And then to do town views
Yeah.
of Origin and ACL.
Okay.
But I mean, they should do it because, you know.
So the sort of the way of the future is that every home will have a smart meter and you'll be paying a different rate based on the time of day that you use the energy.
But will it be your decision, or will they just switch your things on and off?
So it depends on what contract you enter into with your supplier. So the way some of the Victorian deals work at the moment, there's like a few different rates over the course of the day, and so you can be non-curtailed, which is basically where you use whatever you want and you have to pay for it, or you can be on a plan where they can curtail you, in which case your rate is capped.
It'd be a brave government that would do it. Much rather let the private companies do it.
Yeah, and that'll be the difference. Sorry.
The other thing to me that's been a complete surprise is the data hungriness of AI.
Oh, yeah.
Has that warped the market? I mean, you're
Absolutely.
looking at more than 50% of the world's electricity going into AI in the next couple of years, aren't you?
Yeah, the numbers are of that order of magnitude. I don't know the exact numbers. It'll depend how fast the
So
AI goes, but it's crazy. Yeah.
Has that, how has that warped the market and the decision space of governments to do anything with it?
I don't think it even has yet here. I think it definitely has in the States. Particularly, I mean, when you start hearing stories about, well, maybe Google's going to reopen 3 Mile Island so that they can start generating nuclear power for their data centres again. I mean, that's great. One hopes that they'll come down the energy usage curve quickly and perhaps reduce the amount that they're using. But yeah, it's taken everyone by surprise. And the rate at which it's developed is like this, and the rate at which you can build new electricity generations like that.
So I've heard that in India there are big data centres, nearby villages have regular brownouts just because.
I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
The media seems to be reporting that electricity prices are going to go up a lot.
Yep.
I think because of having to build more transmission lines mainly,
That's right.
and probably the federal government's going to stop the subsidies that they've been doing, or they appear to be hedging about whether they'll, keep them beyond the end of the year or something. Is that accurate?
I have no degree of accuracy around what the federal government might do or might not do by the end of the year.
Yeah.
But what I can say is that certainly there's lots of debate around how you best ease the impact of energy prices on households, and it goes to the intersection between social policy and economic policy. It's sort of, a dry economic rationalist, which I probably am, would say you are better off subsidising people's cost of living through the social welfare system than through offering an energy subsidy to everyone. And other people, for political reasons, would have different views from that. But you're absolutely right. The price will go up because the transmission volume is required to double in the next 10 years.
Any sense of how much the price might go up?
There's a really nice piece of analysis, I think, from Alan Kohler in the conversation earlier in the week.
Okay, I'll look for it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
it's basically, it breaks down the proportion of the energy bills by transmission, generation and retail margin, and it's sort of looks like that.
So, can we come back to your, I'm interested in your original comment that Origin is offering for $800 a month.
Yeah.
It's offering free car,
Well, it's not free.
No, well, that's $100,000 a year.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money, and that is, I'm just trying to work through, is that practical? Is it maybe in Sydney it's practical, or because here I don't think that's even you wouldn't even think about doing that.
Well, if you leased a car, the numbers stack up. If you lease an EV, so Origin does an Origin 360 program where they'll lease you a novated lease, and as part of that novated lease, you get access to their power plants. You get free energy during 10 to 2, and so so they've gone out and bought a fleet of vehicles as part of their energy transition. So it's power plus transportation, and given that they're both being powered by electricity, then it's coming back into their. So I guess what I was just saying, $800 a month for a lease on a vehicle is not much. EV.
Plus your
if
solar
it's a
panels,
vehicle,
plus your battery, plus all your electricity.
and if it's a vehicle, you're able to salary sacrifice. So money you otherwise paying in tax is paying for the car.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
I'm going to take it to a slightly higher level. All these conversations just tell me that, like, the market is failing and the system is failing, and it's just a bit of chaos. I'm just wondering what sort of conversations or advocacy needs to start happening at a level to get, I think, a bit of vision perhaps and sort of a direction. Because I mean, if I bring it right down to me, it's like I bought solar panels 5 years ago, and now I see that anything that was within scope of payback is not there. I look at batteries now and I go, well, I can't make any sound financial decisions because I've got no idea what the policies are going forward. And I assume that if that's for me, that's the same for you at CS Energy, that's the same for like everyone who's sort of working the system of like, it's really hard to make any investment decisions that might actually make it better. I'm just sort of wondering like what opportunities within the system do you see to try and, I guess, stabilise it and take us forward?
It's such a great question because, 3 weeks ago we wouldn't have been asking that question because at that time there was bipartisan support from both sides of politics for net zero by 2050, and now there isn't. I think you have to come at the question from a couple of directions. One of which is I have a great colleague who's a risk consultant, and I remember talking to her after the most recent election of President Trump, and I said, well, what's happening with your American clients and climate risk? And she said, well, it's good. I've got this great line worked out, which is it doesn't matter what Donald Trump thinks about climate change. It doesn't matter whether he thinks it's real or not. It is having material impacts on people's businesses, lives, communities, and economies and nature right now. And so if you're in a business that's exposed to those things, you're starting to price them already. The same is true of the energy transition. The financial markets have started to price in energy transition. The economies and the technologies have got a fair way down the road of evolving to deliver upon them. We need to go a lot faster than we are if we're to avoid the temperature increases of around about 2 degrees by 2100. And every time a group like this comes together and wants to have a conversation about it, a little bit more happens. So, this afternoon I was at the Alta COP what's that thing called?
Precinct.
Thank you, the precinct in the Valley. And, the last time there was Alta COP, it was only in Singapore, but a whole heap of people came. I was in Paris earlier in the year, and there's an organisation called Climate Now that basically runs a ginormous 4-day exhibition in the Royal Exhibition Hall that people like you come along to learn about all the things that you could do yourselves and the industry do. And all of everyone else does. I was in London earlier in the year listening to the chief executive of Octopus talking about the new industrial revolution for Britain in renewable energy. So there is a whole world of economy that is pursuing this stuff really, really quickly. And there are a few politicians who think that they're going to win a few more votes by perhaps having a different position for various reasons. And I guess to me what that says is we haven't yet persuaded the people who would vote for them that this is important. Or we've annoyed them so much with the transmission and the wind farms and all of the rest of it that they haven't seen how it will be beneficial to them. So it becomes a people challenge. You know, it becomes enough workforce, enough innovation, enough political commitment to hold out for another 25 years of energy transition, because it's a transition, not a switch. But yeah, it's a great question. I love the fact that I've just done 2 panels today, both of which were agreed to when there was a different policy. I am not representing the views of CS Energy here at all, or I won't be on their board.
I actually have got solar.
Yep.
The question is, in winter time, it doesn't generate energy. So, I know what other people find, but in winter time, there's shorter days. And I don't generate enough, even if I had a battery, to be self-sufficient.
Yep.
That's right. That's so the question is, with all this talk of self-sufficiency in solar, what's going to happen in winter time? Because the batteries aren't going to keep going for, I mean, over the year the solar does generate more than I consume, but the batteries aren't going to hold charge for a year.
Yeah, exactly, and that's one of the really hard things to understand about these big batteries, is they're kind of not like the Duracell batteries that you buy in the supermarket where you stick them in the cupboard and plug them into your whatever when you need them. They actually go up and down and they don't hold their charge. So these lithium-ion batteries last for 4 hours, which is great for load shifting over the course of one day, but it doesn't do the off-grid thing. So I remember working with some people who did the economics of the 100% renewable energy transition. They did it for New Zealand because it was easier because they had a lot of hydro. And up to 95% it's pretty sensible. And then the last 5% is really, 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 really expensive.
So that's why CS Energy is putting in a new gas plant to provide that.
It's to provide peaking gas, yeah. Yeah, absolutely, because there are moments in time, so there are gas futures that you can sell for, I can't remember the numbers, I'm not really numbers, but good numbers, and then every now and then there's a peak where you can sell those 5-minute increments of energy for $15,000 a pop per megawatt, and so we're generating 1,000 of them. It's like, it's just stupid money. Yeah. But you're absolutely right, that's the problem. The problem that we're trying to overcome is the fact that the sun doesn't shine consistently all year round, the wind doesn't blow consistently all year round, our load and our demand is not the same or predictable particularly.
Yeah. So the winter issue, for example, in Queensland is possibly manageable, but in Victoria where you get shorter days and there's big demand is going to happen in winter time.
You need more Ugg boots and more jumpers and more things. Yeah. Yep.
So they're going to have to, Victoria is going to have to invest in something too.
Yeah, and so when you do these studies, so for example we did the net zero study for Canada, the answer for Canada relies on nuclear, because if you let Canadians get cold, they die.
Yeah.
So do Victorians.
No, not to the same extent. Not quite in the same way. Well, maybe not quite so quickly.
Those silly footy jokes.
We can also use pumped hydro.
Yes.
Get around that.
Yeah, so there's pumped hydro coming in.
They can always come to
as well.
Queensland.
Okay.
Thermal energy.
Thermal energy.
Because that hasn't been discussed.
Mm-hmm.
But it's used, for example, in New Zealand and it's used in Europe.
Yeah.
So have you got any comment on thermal energy?
Yes. I have one comment on thermal energy, which is geology. So they have it in New Zealand because of the volcanoes and all that stuff. They have it in Iceland for exactly the same reason. I don't know the European story, but our problem is that we have very old geology and we haven't got geologically active stuff near the surface. I think we could do a lot more with housing design and passive ventilation and a lot of those kinds of things. You know, there's some really, really interesting innovation coming out of the Middle East in terms of the classic desert architecture and how it captures moisture and wind and cools to reduce the requirements for energy from the building. Okay.
Don.
To your point, I understand it's now suggested, I think I heard it on a recent science show, that we have enough heat reasonably shallow to do heating, not to produce electricity, because it's not that hot, but it's enough to produce heating to warm houses and things like that. And that could take that.
Is that in
Yes,
Australia?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that probably would be enough to do heat pumps, I'd reckon. But
It's a bit like, in the old days, they'd hook the power station up to all the buildings around it and warm them. They'd use that to cool the water for the boilers. But anyway, yeah.
we've kind of gone all over the place. But
Yes.
hopefully it's interesting.
Just a question. There was a my question is around the generators expanding into new revenue streams like Origin is with the leasing of vehicles. Arena had done a couple years ago a analysis of the benefit of vehicles providing battery storage back to the grid, and there was a really good graph that showed there was, the potential based on the fleet size was almost equivalent or double the size of the Snowy Hydro scheme. And I guess I'm just wondering if that's if the technology is there, and it is proven in other parts of the world. That seems like, Craig, you're talking about the policy. If government's not willing to do it, private enterprise, that's the opportunity. That's the additional revenue stream. That's kind of diversifying their business as they go from energy to also transportation. And all of a sudden, they've got these massive supply agreements from China with EVs and.
Yeah.
Do you see that? I mean, is that a potential pathway for?
I think there'll be a huge amount of business model disruption over the next 10 years or so. So if you think about, in the same sentence, climate risk, house insurance, vehicle insurance, and electricity, and you suddenly go, if you're RACQ and I want you to put your vehicle inside while there's a storm, plug it into the grid to keep yourself operating while the power goes out, manage your home against climate, you end up with a completely different business. So the sort of opportunity space is massive, and a long time ago, back in 2003, I did an MBA thesis on why organisations would adopt sustainability as part of their strategy, and the reasons are still the same. Either they can make money out of it, or they really passionately believe in it. That's kind of it. And there's not, there's like Patagonia, and then there's the rest of the economy. So the challenge is to work out ways for people to make money out of it, or, for example, to use the little levers that have a huge impact. So in 2018, we did a transaction for the Queensland Government where we entered into an agreement to buy all of the electricity that all of the schools and all of the hospitals and all of the state government departments needed. So that's handled by a single contract. And my staff worked with some analysts to design the deal that we needed to get to meet the government's target, which was 50% by 2030 at that time. So we entered into a contract in 2018 that required progressively increasing amounts of renewable energy in the state's mix of what it bought. That has been provided by the service provider that has entered into solar power purchase agreements in order to make up the balance of the renewables.
Back-to-backed it in terms of...
Yep. Absolutely. So instead of having every school having to buy renewable power or put solar panels on the roof, or every hospital having to change all the light bulbs, we just went, the easiest way to get the state to meet the renewable energy target is with this contract.
Cool.
So if you'd missed that opportunity, we would have had another 10 years of waiting. So there are some opportunities that require a bit of creativity and imagination to see them, that have an outsized impact. You can all line up.
Hi, Kimberly.
Hello. Yes, you haven't had a question yet.
My question was around this, kind of coming back to that earlier question around who is driving the strategy to get Queensland, and I will broach it as Queensland, to net zero. And has the state and is there an actual advantage to the state doing that work? Or is there something behind the scenes, which could be our exporting of things, it could be our politics, it could be culture, it could be...
So we have an energy roadmap, and we had one before under the last government, and they're a little bit different, but they both point to net zero by 2050 as the policy ambition, and they both believe that they're going to get there based on taking...
So state is driving?
Yep. And so what the state government wants to do is to attract private capital in to build renewable projects and wind farms and things like that. And they're establishing some financial instruments to basically sell little bits of that to people, so that will happen.
Okay, and so my second question was, where do you think the 3 big wins will be then?
The 3 big wins?
So where do you think we're going to make big steps forward because of that strategy? That'll change the way things are, and it might not just be in the energy system, it might be maybe in how we use that, or is there another big change that has to happen on the sides that will help us get to a reduced emission?
It's a lot. It's a
great
question. 3 big things. I think it's all about the people in the system. I really do. So it's about the political will and the ability to execute the government's plan. So the people who do the work for the government actually getting on and doing it. So that means the people who work for CS, the people who build hydro, all the power stations. It's about the rural and regional communities allowing it to happen and embracing the economic opportunities that come. So Western Downs is one of the 11 councils in Southern Queensland Landscapes, which I chair, and they're going to be the epicentre of renewable energy in Queensland. They've already been coal and coal seam gas and high value ag, so they're not scared of it in quite the same way that some of the more coastal communities are. And then the third bit of the community, the third bit of people is every single person in a leadership position who can do something should.
I get Andrew had a question.
Yeah, there was one over here as well.
But I can go after it.
Sorry. I actually wanted to take you back to the story you mentioned at the start around your work in Melbourne and the grasslands. And if you're able to just expand on that, and what were the learnings you learnt from sort of taking it from small to, as you mentioned, was $100 million to buy property. And I guess it's in the context of the platypus and I think Sown with restorations, where I think there's a lot of good work that's being done locally by local volunteers. We've got fundamental challenges, like in the 70s they blew up the creek and put a sewer through it. And to this day, if there's a log in it, the council pulls it out and will just dump huge piles of rocks on the bank instead of actually going, there's an ecological role here as well. And there's we really struggle to get 2 sides of council to even consider that each other might have a perspective. And it's sort of like, we need to scale this, we need to go bigger than just pulling some weeds and putting plants in the ground if we're actually to achieve some of the goals we're working towards.
Look, I tend to use case studies to approach these things, and the best current case study that I'm aware of is the work of Auckland City Council in their blue and green infrastructure initiatives, so it'd be worth looking that up. In terms of the Melbourne story, it was a little bit different from yours because it was a greenfields area at risk of development, so it wasn't a restoration story, so it'll be a little bit different. The way it worked was there was 15,000 hectares of Victorian volcanic plains grassland west of Melbourne, just around Werribee, sort of out towards Geelong, and it was flat, and it was where the houses were going to go next if Melbourne continued to expand like this. It was also critically endangered, and everyone had been getting really annoyed by the EPBC referrals that the construction industry were having to put themselves through, because of course the conservationists were saying, no, you can't clear this, it's critically endangered. So that was the context. So the deal that we put together was, we said, look, if you think of all of Melbourne as a biodiversity site, or a site where you get to avoid the highest value biodiversity, minimise the impact on the biodiversity that's there, and offset anything that's remaining, and you think of it as all the way across Melbourne from the top to the bottom, then this area is going to be an offset site, because it's the highest value, most intact, etc, etc, etc. So we needed to understand all of the biodiversity across all of the rest of it, and then basically do the science and the arithmetic around how would you extract money from people who wanted to do development in places where maybe probably the biodiversity wouldn't survive in any case, and funnel that money towards purchasing the bit that was the highest value. So you needed a few things. You needed the high value bit had to be big enough to be ecologically sustainable in the long term, so intactness. People needed to agree to do it. You needed the farmers not to go and trash it in the meantime. You needed someone to be able to do stacks and stacks of biological surveys really quite quickly. And so we had the scientists from the Arthur Rylah Institute. We had the cooperation of the planning people who were planning Melbourne. They were called the Growth Areas Authority. So we did a few things that were kind of clever to manage people's behaviour. So like, we knew that the landowners who were speculating weren't going to let the biologists onto their sites if they came from the Environment Department. And so we arranged for the planning department to contract the people who met our standards to go and do the biodiversity mapping of where we needed it done. So we modelled it first, so we knew a lot about where things should be.
Yep.
And then the surveying was done very, very quickly, very intensively, over about a 2-year period. And we basically had these placemat maps with traffic light colours of where the biodiversity values were the highest, which meant that we sat with the planning people as they drew the lines of where Melbourne was going to be allowed to expand to, and where the roads were going to go. And we basically argued with them over a map, which is kind of pretty familiar to anyone who's worked in planning law. And then the deal back to the government was, if you sign this agreement with the Commonwealth, this strategic assessment under the EPBC Act, then you won't have to do the EPBC referrals. So there was a huge upside to the developers in terms of it being easy. So it's all that logic of, if I know the rules, I can comply with the rules, and if I know them early, I haven't sunk costs. But of course there are always some people who disagree. So the Dennis Family Corporation took the Victorian government to court over the agreement, and I think they won. But in the meantime, a lot of other biodiversity got protected. So a couple of ingredients in that, we didn't know we weren't allowed to do it. It never entered our minds that we weren't going to be allowed to do it. I had a boss who was incredibly supportive, and I had a minister who was at the end of his political career, and he was like, well, if you reckon you can get away with it, go for it. And my boss was the same. He was like, the first day, he's like, how much is this going to cost? It's like, a couple of $100 million. It's like, you just say it fast enough. We never asked for legal advice. You know, we entered into a binding 30-year agreement with the Commonwealth on behalf of the state of Victoria with no legal advice. It was a good agreement. It was fine. So there was a fair bit of boldness in the science and in the public sector stewardship and in the politics. But if you look now, there is a grassland reserve west of Melbourne that shouldn't be there.
Okay, Monica.
One of our previous speakers was the former Queensland scientist, and he's a mathematician and statistician. Hugh
QA'd my papers. So he QA'd the Melbourne Grassland Reserve and he QA'd the Common Offset Framework,
okay. So what he told us, and I guess he was...
quality assurance. He did the scientific review to check that they were okay.
What he told us was actually that he had calculated exactly which areas of Australia need to be protected for maximum biodiversity protection, but he still, although he was spending half his life in Canberra, couldn't get it over the line. So my question is, if there is such good data and such good information, why is it not being implemented?
That's what we're all going through with the EPBC forms at the moment. Trying to get it over the line yet
but
again.
I think the real answer is human greed.
Yeah.
You know, it's basically there are very, very, very powerful interests that do not want to protect the environment. And there are private property rights in this country that means that people who own land have a certain level of duty bestowed upon them on behalf of the community, but it's not the level of expectation that would meet, you know, the 30 by 30 targets, which I imagine is what you were talking about.
So then, Craig, you always say the law and the policy should reflect the community. So if it's not reflecting the community, how can we change it so that it becomes
Vote.
again?
And look what happened last time we voted in Queensland. We voted.
But obviously that doesn't change anything. It must be something else because
we need more.
Well, we haven't really discussed the role of the media, and the media has got a big stake in playing up divisiveness, and the consensus doesn't sell papers.
No. Yeah, but also, I mean,
media.
one of the problems of the international treaty system is that you can sign treaties doing things that together are impossible. So I was doing some work last week with one of Hugh's, well, she was a PhD student, now she's a professor at the uni, and she's added up the amount of land required for all of the renewable energy transmission, distribution and generation that we need in Australia, the sustainable ag and the 30 by 30 targets, and there isn't enough land in Australia to do all of those things at the same time. So there's a couple of different versions of the answer, one of which is what are the coexistence arrangements? So how can you get the environmental values and the agricultural values and the energy production values to coexist on a piece of land? But yeah, so there's no simple answer. If there was, we would have done it.
Is Treasury looking at?
Which Treasury?
Is it regenerative economics and is that on their radar?
I don't know. I'm not that close to Treasury. I don't know.
Because that's the kind of lever.
I mean, they are doing, the Commonwealth's doing some pretty interesting intergenerational reporting and studying. But, yeah. But it's like the real answer to your question is, if we want to meet those biodiversity and nature protection targets, we have to dramatically change land use. And at the moment, the economic system that we have would require a level of compensation that we're not societally ready to pay.
And of course,
Michael, so you're right. Do you have an opinion on nuclear? Is it still the elephant in the room?
I don't have an opinion on nuclear. I think it's interesting that Australia finds nuclear difficult, and without doubt the environmental potential consequences of nuclear are very, very high. And I think that in itself is enough to prevent nuclear from being developed in Australia. But I don't have a personal opinion on
if you're interested, Michael, the ACF did a
what's the ACF?
Australian Conservation Foundation.
Yeah.
They did a kind of a panel speaker out at Botanics at the end of last year, and there's a gentleman from Melbourne who's their nuclear specialist that goes back 10, 20 years, and so he's kind of wheeled out at all the pro-nuclear events, and he kind of systematically talks through the economics of nuclear and how it's globally getting the resources to even start a nuclear program in Australia pushes things out quite a long way.
It's pretty expensive, yeah. But from an environmental impact perspective, I used to regulate the Ranger uranium mine in the Northern Territory. So it sits in the middle of Kakadu National Park and the World Heritage Area. And they mined uranium there for a very, very, very long time, closed, 6 years ago or so. And so we had a division of scientists whose job was to make sure that that mine didn't impact the surrounding environment. So it's possible, but whether it's a good idea or not.
Yep.
How are we going? How long do we go for?
Well, no,
Ross?
I was just looking at the time now.
I can do one more. I've got one more. Gentleman in the blue shirt, Wild Homes.
Oh, the gentleman, sorry. That's the problem. But has there been any study to show just how much energy we would save with architecturally efficient, with
enormous, huge. Yeah, I don't know.
Building.
I'm not an expert in that field, but yeah, look, I'm pretty sure that there have been. Arab's done some of the best work on that kind of thing.
Yeah, right. They would have had to, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know the answer.
Yeah, because it would be really, really good if we could get some laws.
Well, I mean, if
regarding
you could get everyone to set their air conditioning even at 25 degrees.
Yeah,
not
but
27.
developments, housing developers, they just go for cheap stuff. Build a house as cheaply as you can, but...
The green ratings, though. The green ratings.
I don't know. Am I wrong here?
There were certainly energy efficient standards and all new construction. They've been watered down in Queensland quite a bit. But they're certainly a lot better than they were, say, in the 1960s.
Right.
Yeah.
But nothing about the costs to refit, say, windows or...
Yeah, that's a hard one.
That's another study, I think.
Yes.
I think
There's lots of work into the energy saving technology. It depends on your external climate, but lots and lots of upside in the building space.
Yeah, I think that politically still got damage from when they tried doing the retrofits program. But I would say that it's actually still got very high potential, especially as a social policy.
Well,
to
and
support
I
low-income
mean,
people.
nobody in the Commonwealth government's going to do anything like pink bats and green lines ever again. So,
Too risky.
yeah.
Although batteries is going close to it, what they're doing now.
Yeah. Well, we ask you lots of random questions.
That's right. I hope it was fun. I mean, I thought it was fun. And I do have a very broad, very shallow background in a lot of different environmental things.
I must say, I'm slightly depressed.
Are you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it just seems to me that, as Andrew's saying, and we're sort of feeling our way forward. We've got AI demanding more power, and we've got the fact that greenhouse gas needs to be managed, and we aren't progressing fast enough to meet things. It's not positive.
Like, if I could just add,
We have a plan.
I have a different view. I'm a tremendous optimist. It's like
So am I.
you couldn't get up and do this stuff if you didn't think we were going to pull it off. Like you just feel like you're completely wasting your time. But yeah, I have to believe that humans are clever enough and able to arrange ourselves in such a way that we'll pull this off. And we will at some point. No, but the thing that we don't know the answer to is, what will the future population be?
It's too big.
It is too big at the moment, yes. And so if it is to be this size, it needs to use less. And at some point, the environment will require us to comply with that direction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, send some people to Mars. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Kimberly.